by the military-industrial complex.
And now, the Taliban will pay a price.
Do we have the confidence to do in the Middle East what our fathers and grandfathers accomplished in Europe and Asia?
The situation in Afghanistan is deteriorating.
What I do oppose is a dumb war.
All right, it is the season finale of the Boardwalk, season 1. I wasn't sure how long we do this, and then I realized how fucking tired we are from trying to arrange this shit every week. So this will be the last episode for a couple weeks, 4 or 5 weeks, just that. For everybody that's been listening so far, thank you. We are not going to be absent from the podcast world in the month of October, though. We will be appearing on the Kogan Conversation, which will be discussing the war in Afghanistan and just the general idea behind the U.S. military interventionism. But before we do any of that stuff, we're going to close out the first season by explaining what the hell train, advise, and assist means. And I'm going to let Stu introduce our guest.
Oh, yeah. So this is a pretty exciting one for me. So joining us today is former captain Evan Eggert, who I had the supreme pleasure of working with in over in Paktia province in southeast, and on the tail end of my first contract. So it's definitely great to have. We worked in the G2 together. More than me, you guys stuck me in the like counter threat analyst position, and I produced exactly one project major, and then no one asked for anything from me. Played a lot of spades and darts, but I was there. Great to have you on, Evan.
Thanks, Stu. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Well, that intro is a nice little glimpse into how we lost in Afghanistan. Was mismanagement of personnel, because clearly I didn't know how to use you and your skills. Just threw you at some PowerPoints we needed, and you got them done. So I appreciate that. I'll just go ahead and share a little bit of fill that story out a little bit. I was the G2 for Task Force Southeast at FOB Lightning in right by Gardez, Paktia in 2017. I was an Army captain at the time, got out right after that deployment. So Stu caught me at the very tail end of my 10-year military career when I was most jaded, most burned out, and angriest. So that was a good time there together, Stu, and I definitely appreciated your work. Prior to that, I guess my journey to becoming the Task Force Southeast G2, I was a branch detail officer. So I started out active duty as an armor lieutenant in the infantry, and the maneuver branches need a lot of lieutenants, and then the support branches need a lot of captains. So it's kind of like a deal the Army has worked out where people can kind of start their career in one area, move to another. So that's how I ended up going into intelligence. And I never got any classes on how to employ contractors. So we were kind of winging it at Southeast. Oddly enough, I even helped close FOB Lightning in 2014 on my first deployment, transferred it to the Afghan Army with 1st Squadron, 3rd Cav Regiment. I was a police advisor there in 2014 at the tail end of OEF, and then came back to Lightning after 3rd Cav Regiment reopened it in 2016, and then we rebuilt intelligence capabilities there in 2017. So kind of a fun odyssey throughout Loya Paktia.
So you probably had a lot more dealing than with the actual Afghan personnel that we did. Obviously, we were writing intelligence reports, white papers, doing briefings, doing PowerPoints and stuff. But you actually interfaced with your counterparts or subordinates or whatever in the Afghan army. So can you tell us a little about you guys want to start there? Maybe we talk a little bit about what that was like, because we haven't really discussed that on the podcast much.
Do we want to do that? Do we want to introduce like the concept behind TAA?
Yeah, go ahead. That's smart.
Okay.
Then we'll talk about that. I was just curious when you said you worked with the police, because I bet that was a shit show.
Yeah, I'll honestly agree with anything you say, Zach, with that mustache. I just trust you.
Thank you, Stu. So this is just going to validate all the research I did on the clock at work today. So TAA, we've addressed it throughout the season so far, right? It's train, advise, assist. That was technically the mission when we were in Afghanistan. And I think most people are familiar with Operation Enduring Freedom, which was the NATO operation. Well, I guess ISAF was the NATO operation, but Operation Enduring Freedom was our combat mission in Afghanistan up to the very end of 2014. And then we were kind of talking about it when we get into 2015, it becomes Operation Resolute Support. And then the RCs, which was Regional Command, became TAA or became TACS, Train Advise Assist Commands. And it's one of the bigger lies in the war in Afghanistan, this concept that Barack Obama in December of 2014, when we transitioned to this Train Advise Assist Command structure, very famously said all combat operations have ended in Afghanistan, which explains why so many Americans still died after January 1st, 2015, because they weren't in any combat operations. That's like statements like that is kind of why we do this podcast, right? Because that's just very clearly not true. And we'd had a train advise assist role going back to when we first got into Afghanistan. Like when you read Horse Soldiers, we're training, advising, and assisting Dostum's Uzbek riders. When you read Lions of Kandahar, which is 2006, the SF unit led by I think then Captain Russ Bradley, they're training and advising their Afghan counterparts. That element always existed in Iraq or in Afghanistan. And this is one of those things where politicians are playing games with people's lives, right? It sounds really good to say that we ended combat operations, so we'll call it Train, Advise, Assist Command, and we'll just put a lot of emphasis on we're not going beyond what we call the ground defense area, which is where our military was allowed to go and patrol in order to protect or defend the installations that we were stationed at. And so, yeah, we get into January 1, 2015. It is now Train, Advise, Assist Command, and really not much changed from December 31st to January 1st. The most obvious lack of change is that we didn't improve the Afghan military any by stopping what few combat operations we were doing outside of the SOF and Ranger world. So that's when Evan shows up and he tries to do his damnedest to help out the Afghan police.
Yeah, so no shit, there I was, 25-year-old First Lieutenant Evan Egger, first deployment, trying to close this thing, trying to go out there and win it for God and country. It was the tail end of OEF, just like Zach described. I mean, major combat operations, sure, they were done. Like the conventional army was not out patrolling in battalion and brigade size movements anymore. We were static on forward operating bases and that sort of stuff. Obviously, the heavy fighting created time and space to do some of that train, advise, assist mission. Classic special forces mission to build host nation security forces. But to do it at scale in a country of 30 million obviously required some conventional forces if we were to try to make our graceful exit with a viable Afghan security force system and institutions in place. So 2014, we were pursuing what they called functionally based security force assistance. And I've got the handbook here with me from General Dunford himself. It reads very much like a task organization for an Army brigade combat team. And it contains snips of U.S. doctrine, somewhat made what they called Afghan good enough. But this was the decisive operation to go out there and win this thing. But yet it did not have, the full resourcing to be successful. Arbitrary numbers of troop limits, caps on the numbers of forces that CENTCOM could request from Army Forces Command. And, I'm looking at this Army centric because that's my background. That's where you guys served and the units you supported. And really the Army bears most of the blame and most of the credit for what went down in Afghanistan, because they fielded the battle space integrating units. They fielded the preponderance of general officers and staffs that were held responsible for pieces of terrain. So the Army's security training at that time, around 2014, was okay. We actually trained for the mission that we deployed on. So we had some of us, my platoon included, in pre-deployment training, act like we were Afghans without much experience, pretended to be like them, while some of the maneuver units practiced providing security for notional advisors. And then we went to the National Training Center at Fort Irwin and actually practiced advising there with opposing forces that somewhat resembled Afghan military personnel, somewhat resembled Afghan police. And so we practiced our ability to move as a unit, to protect advisors, and to go give good advice and training.
I wanted to point out real quick, since you brought up that General Dunford helped, he helped with that manual, right?
Don't know if he helped, but he definitely put his name on the front
His
of it.
name's on it. General Dunford is on the board of directors at Lockheed Martin now. I just wanted to throw that in there.
No way.
I know.
He got a board. He got a board job.
He
Get
did.
outta here.
He did a board job. What I did like about you bringing up all that doctrinal nonsense, Evan, is that this is something that we have talked about, right? Like the Afghan military, the Afghan police, they don't operate on doctrine. Hell, the American military doesn't operate on doctrine half the time, right? Like that shit's there when like somebody's sergeant major gets a wild hair up their ass and he's gonna get the battalion squared away, and so you spend a week doing like task and battle drills, and then you go back to doing your regular everyday job. Like that's what doctrine is for pretty much anybody that's not combat arms in the Army, right? So we're going to take this thing and we're going to apply it to Afghans who are, Tajiks and Uzbeks in Pashtunistan who don't want to be in Pashtunistan any more than we want to be there, and who are told to go and defend, the guys from the Gilzai Hotak tribe who they fucking hate anyways. Like, of course this was going to fail. We looked at it from a Western American military strategy mindset. And at no point did we look at it and go, maybe the Tajiks should just like secure the northeastern part of the country, and the Uzbek ANA elements can control the northern part, and the Pashtuns can do whatever the hell they want in the south. And you have clear lines in the sand. And I don't want to forget Stu's Hazaras. They can patrol the center of the country. All right, like realistically, that would have made more sense, because Afghanistan is not America, where for the most part, America is a melting pot or a mosaic, as they say nowadays, right? Like we can all, for the most part, get along. It doesn't work that way out there, and it especially doesn't work when you try to force people to get along.
100%. Yeah, and the police headquarters I advised in 2014 was kind of a weird mix, and maybe that was common to the police throughout the country, where they had to have some semblance of locality. So there were some Pashtun officers at fairly high positions compared to the Army, but there were plenty of Tajiks, guys from Badakhshan down in Paktia, expected to keep the Gilzai and Karlani tribes at bay. And like you just said, that's a no-go. That's just not realistic. So the Tajiks, they're going to bust out their best survival techniques, and they're going to bribe their way out of the role. They'll try to fail upward within the Afghan security forces, or
maybe they are more like our military than I thought.
Yeah, created in our image, and look what we have wrought. So
yeah, our image. So I like to give recap to the listeners, just because I think people sometimes get confused. So 2015, you're over there, Evan. We've swapped. You were there right when we swapped from this OEF to the TAC format, right?
I just missed it, so I went home right before it. Yeah.
So yeah, and so for the listeners, the point was to, like, in 2015, we basically said, we had an election. Ghani's president now. We're going to try to hand all this stuff over to the Afghans. Now begins this process of transitioning out, and of course that lasted a lot longer than we thought it did. That article I had published in the Atlantic was talking about a drawdown, because when I was in Kuwait and waiting to go over there, there was no one there in the lines. It was like there was like no one there, and we thought this was it. I mean, we thought we very well could be the last aviators to ever step foot in Afghanistan, and boy, were we wrong. That kept going on, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, aviators carrying out, world record breaking airlifts even just a few weeks ago. So
I know that.
Yeah.
I see what I like about the format from our boardwalk days is that we're allowed to just go off script. So I'm going to go off script right now, and we're going to talk about that for a second. How the fuck does our government get the idea that we should boast about how greatly we have emergency evacuated everybody out from because of their failed withdrawal plan? It's insane, right? And I guess Secretary Blinken is getting his ass handed to him, and deservedly so, right? And had the audacity, they asked him about, like, because they inherited Donald Trump's withdrawal plan or his peace agreement, or whatever you want to call it. And he said, we inherited a deadline, not a plan. Well, I was told that the reason that Joe Biden would be such a great president is because he's got all this foreign policy experience, right? That's because he was around before all these countries, they were still kingdoms. He's so fucking old, like, oh, he was going to fix it. Am I to believe that nobody on his campaign staff thought, hey, by the way, Joe, Donald Trump signed this thing back in February. We better have a plan in case we got to, enforce it. Is that really the expectation? So I'm not surprised, right, that nobody's being held accountable for any of this shit. And then Secretary Blinken goes on and he's like, he said, we're going to hold the Taliban accountable. How? But I digress. How much worse was it in 2017 when you got there?
Oh, that's a funny story. Well, you guys have talked about district stability assessments. I think didn't Mick describe that too? And you guys all worked on it.
Yeah, we talked a lot about those. Yeah, and how those were kind of falsified at the high level.
Oh yeah,
but on a map, you can't deny the easy use.
Yeah, I mean, you guys could build a business model like charts. Just do district stability assessments. I'd definitely invest because showed up at Lightning January 2017, just like a couple of weeks before inauguration. And so we were still under the Obama era strategy. Obviously Trump took his time to come up with a strategy, and I use that with air quotes because what a fucking strategy that was. But so 17 showed up. Things were worse, I would say, because we had not been there dropping bombs and helping the ANA hold terrain. And things were worse because we didn't know how bad they were, because we had closed FOB Lightning and lost access to all of the sources and intelligence we had been collecting without people on the ground.
They were also worse because when people like Kyle or Stu or myself would say things like, hey, this place is a shit show, like, for some reason, once it got to like a full board kernel, they heard we're making progress.
and
that's another big issue.
I think I said it before when we were talking about it. Like the actual like assessment criteria were completely skewed. Like if they're so I think it was like from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, but in order to get below, I think it was 1 to 5, and in order to get below a 3, the district governor had to not be in the district at all. So if he's holed up in his house, if he's holed up in the district center, surrounded by the Taliban, and they control every else in the district, it's still like essentially a C. Like, it's fine, you're passing, it's okay. Like for some reason, we decided that was the way that we should assess the situation, because the truth costs people jobs.
Mm-hmm.
The assessment structure or the criteria, like, the more I think about it, would work really good in first and second world countries, right? Like, if there's no governor for Idaho, where I live, well, that's a bad example. We're about as anarchy, the fucking word I'm thinking of, anachronistic as they come. But like, if California doesn't have a governor, like, that's an issue, even if it is Gavin Newsom or not Gavin Newsom, I guess, right? Like, in America, that would be a big deal. Like, holy shit, there's no governor. But in fucking Western Kandahar, who gives a shit if Gorak District doesn't have a governor? No one cares. If Kandahar doesn't have a governor, no one really cares, right? Because that doesn't really change anything about the security posture throughout the province or throughout the district. Because, like, we talked about it, Kyle and Stu, when we were talking about like Karzai, and he was kind of considered the mayor of Kabul because that's really like where his authority really stops. Like Razik ran Kandahar. So if Razik were alive and the governor was killed, which the governor at one point he almost died. You guys remember that?
Yeah, he almost died.
Yeah, so he almost died. So we didn't have we had an interim governor for a little bit, and that didn't change anything about the security posture in the province because you still had Razik and his, fucking self-funded via corruption police force that was really effective and probably, a little war crimey, but who isn't in Afghanistan, right? So
that's a good transition because you just mentioned Razik and the police.
Yeah, this whole criteria on what is a secure district and what is not a secure district was bullshit. And I guarantee you, because I only went to Afghanistan twice, right? But I'm sure over the years it was molded and amended in order to paint a rosier picture. Which, when you're dealing in matters of warfare, the best policy is the fucking truth. But then again, General Dunford is probably not on the board of directors at Lockheed Martin had we told the fucking truth.
Yeah, can you talk about that, Evan, a little bit? You want to go? We can go down the police route, or we can go down the officer painting rosy or picture route. However you want to go. Although you weren't at that grade though at the time. So
yeah, well, yeah. So first deployment, I was a lieutenant working with Afghan colonels. They knew to play the game. They knew I was the guy assigned there. They knew my boss was off chasing more important OER bullets for himself when he was supposed to be the advisor, but instead I was. And, I was probably an okay advisor. I grew up on a farm in Nebraska. I can kind of relate to the small town vibes, some of the inshallah vibes, like the agricultural roots. But yeah, they played the game with us because they wanted the airstrikes. They wanted the money. They would tell us what they thought we wanted to hear. So there was all sorts of progress going on among the Afghan police. And yeah, the election was fair, and the governors were all on board with transporting ballots to Kabul for a recount. So our unit did all sorts of great stuff, being told what we wanted to hear and making progress that we could justify closing down the bases and leaving. So we closed everything. To say we, I speak broadly about the brigade. So 3rd Cav Regiment and a battalion from the 82nd closed FOB Ghazni, FOB Lightning, and Camp Clark, which were the last 3 conventional bases south of Kabul. So after that, there was no conventional presence south of Kabul. Oh, and FOB Shank. Don't forget good old Rocket City. Those were the big facilities that all the small combat outposts had collapsed to during 2012 and 2013. So the Afghan police had just seen us leave their districts, seen us leave their provinces, and then we were at this kind of equivalent of a regional or corps level type headquarters with a Paktia type A police headquarters. So the colonels there, they were good at telling us what we wanted to hear. We even had the joy of an insider attack while we were going to work with the governor. Went out to a security sure at the governor's compound, and then the police chief turned around and blamed us for a negligent discharge. So that was a really great way to build trust and leave on a high note.
Evan, can you talk a little bit about what progress looked like from the police side? Like obviously in our opinion, we thought progress was oh, we control this district, but what did progress look like from the police side? How would they relay that to you? Oh, we've done this, and so that's good.
Yeah, so the things we were looking at under the functionally based security construct were their ability to conduct training on their own. So they reported the number of police cadets or whatever they had trained into patrolmen. They reported the gallons of fuel dispersed to their subordinate units, the ammunition being expended and shipped out, because we tried implementing a kind of this weird pull logistics system instead of more of a Soviet style push system. But because they're so corrupt, everybody up and down the chain was of course pilfering all the resources and money. But they could still report the amounts of fuel and ammo and trained patrolmen. And for them to do it on their own, as well as fielding and maintaining some counter IED capabilities, those were like the critical conditions we had to set before we could leave in peace. But of course we were on a timeline, so we were going to leave no matter what. We just wanted to know how green we were going to make some slides.
Did they know you were leaving?
I'm pretty sure they did.
Yeah.
They saw the helicopters coming out. They saw our unit come in with fewer advisors than 10th Mountain had. Shitty OPSEC among officers and soldiers too anyways. So it was a pretty common conversation point that we were going to be gone.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, there point that kind of gave it away too.
Yeah.
You mentioned the cadets. There was always this pervasive soldier problem in Afghanistan where they'd over-report the number of soldiers. I wonder how deep that goes. Do you think they're reporting like ghost cadets to just bump up those numbers? You start that's how you keep it clean, and you don't start off with soldiers that don't even exist.
Smart. So that reminds me of the documentary from Vice, right? This is what winning looks like, where they identify 20 Afghan soldiers to go to the academy to become Afghan National Army officers. Like on day 0, 8 of them failed drug tests. I guarantee you they still reported they sent 20 to that fucking academy. And on that note, Evan, you're talking about like what their measurements for their parameters for success. Listen, man, selling 100 liters of fuel at the bazaar is just the same as using 100 liters of fuel, right? It's all the same at the end of the day when the accountants are balancing the books.
So,
Oh, yeah.
Did you guys know it was bullshit? Like at the time?
Yeah.
Even at the time, like you guys knew it was bullshit. So how is that dealt with? Like, because we talk a lot about that on the podcast, obviously. Like, you knew it was bullshit, and then they knew they were scamming you, and they're playing up that it's normal and that everything's fine. So we're basically living in that, like the documentary Hypernormalisation says, everyone knows it's falling apart, but we're all pretending it's not. And so how did you guys deal with that at the time, knowing it was bullshit?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because we pivoted to things we liked doing. Like, we helped them with airstrikes. We felt good about that when we took guys off the battlefield. We focused a lot of that as much as we could on force protection in our immediate area, maybe a couple of districts away. And that's kind of how we kept our sanity and sense of purpose about the mission. And things changed too. I mean, I mentioned we had one insider attack against us. That was actually the second insider attack against the team that summer. The first one was against 10th Mountain, like the week we were deploying to go there and replace them. It was the last 2-3 weeks that they got hit by an insider attack. Then Ramadan came, so no advising. We went back out, got hit. So we started scaling back the amount of access that we had to the Afghans, because a dead advisor is no good. We brought them to us for reports and some of the training that we did. We still went out there a few times, even after attacks. But yeah, we kept our sanity just by trying to protect ourselves and get the hell out of there.
So were your insider attack, you said there was one when you were out there, and then there was the one right before. So this is kind of a good transition because we wanted to kind of discuss this. A really big issue, especially after all the combat operations ceased to exist, was insider attacks, which in the industry we refer to as green on blue, and that comes from old Army map reading symbology, right? American forces are blue, enemy forces are red, and friendly forces are green. And green on blue, I mean, it's existed in Afghanistan since like fucking week 1 that we were there, but it got really bad, it seems, towards the end of OEF moving into resolute support. And the gist behind it is there's basically 2 types of green on blue. There is insurgent infiltration, which is how General Razik was killed. The Taliban finally figured out that if we just pull some like 12-year-old and just start grooming him, one day he'll be 20, And in the Afghan military vetting system, and you could probably speak more to this than I can, Evan. Actually, I know you probably can. Like, don't they just like pretty much bypass all screening if like 3 elders vouch for you? Like, it's just a really bad system. What's the worst that could fucking happen then?
Yeah, you get some goat herder from southern Paktika all of a sudden in these high level meetings around generals from various countries. There's nothing bad that could happen there. But yeah, absolutely. Like it was an extremely effective tactic to drive a wedge between our advisors and our Afghan counterparts. And even though what we were doing was basically a big kabuki dance, like it was all theater with a known outcome, and we were just the pawns. Even then, it was an effective tactic because it reduced our exposure to our counterparts. And yeah, that's one of the things about Afghanistan. That's the randomness or the pure exposure to that backwardness. Like it could just be that chai boy, or it could be that shepherd, and people from out in the hills that have never seen a generator in real life, never driven a vehicle, never really left their village, and all of a sudden they're in this spot with access. And oh, by the way, the Taliban is back home recruiting other members of their family and paying much higher if you can carry out an insider attack.
Well, they're paying at all.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's like that was scenario one, and then scenario two, and I think this was the more common of the two, was that just Afghan army or Afghan police soldier or police officer who just has fucking had it and would just start shooting at people. And I again, we'll go back to this is what winning looks like, right? The very first scene, it's like some Marine Corps private, and he's explaining to them that you wash your hands upstream from where you shit and stuff like that. And like, there's a lot of people who, and we're not innocent either regarding this. Like, they will talk about how backwards Afghanistan is, and they're not wrong, right? But they understand the basics like that, and that's even evident in that documentary. And this is what 2010, 2011 time frame, and you got he's like the Afghan checkpoint commander, and he's basically saying, we don't need, like, this is a waste of fucking instruction. Show us how to fire the machine gun, right? So you take that, you amplify it over 20 fucking years, right? And yeah, like you're saying, Evan, there's less interaction, right? Because there's more, there's greater threats for insider attacks or green on blues or infiltrations, whatever you want to call it, and you're going to create an even higher stress environment or an even higher stress situation, and ultimately somebody's going to snap, and everybody's got a fucking gun on them in that country, whether they're in the military or not, unless you're a contractor.
Man, I don't know about the cleanliness, like, knowledge being spread everywhere. I don't know. I talked about it before. At my first deployment, we had to guard the Taliban prisoners at the temporary detention facility on Bath, and we'd take them over to clean up for prayer, and without fail, they would fill their little bucket or whatever to themselves, and they would always wash their feet and then wash their faces in the same basin. It's like, just wash your face first, bro. Like, it's not rocket surgery. Like, come on. I don't know. I think it's not too too much to say that maybe guys were washing their hands in shit water, but yeah, definitely probably a little condescending to be telling them that, and that certainly hurt relations. But I mean, I don't know, you'd have issues with like shared, this is going off on a fucking tangent, but whatever, you aren't going to hear me for a couple weeks, so I got to get it out. But like you'd have shared restrooms with the Afghans at some points, and you'd have to like explain to them not to shit in the showers and stuff, and like not to break the fucking toilet seats by standing on them. So, I don't know, it's definitely cultural differences more than anything, and also just the fact that like it's a third world country that's kind of like a couple hundred years behind just because they're so isolated and they don't get connected with up-to-date things like Louis Pasteur and all of the great things he brought us.
Having worked at a hospital, I will tell you, we're not that different. When you see some of the patients I have, dude, I mean, let me tell you, man, they're not that much different than uneducated Afghans as far as hygiene and cleanliness. So yes, dude, it's disturbing to see it, but it happens here too, and more widespread than you think it does. But
I mean, that's Afghanistan barely has running water in the urban areas. So yeah, of course there's going to be more of a problem there. I would say, considering most places you got to go and drop a bucket into a fucking hole and hope there's still water in there, they're doing all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't waste time when you're doing your whole train device assist thing going, hey, by the way, make sure you poop over here and you wash your hands over here. Show them how to service that fucking weapon. Show them, movement techniques and shit like that. Stuff that's going to actually benefit them.
so after that insider attack, Evan, did you leave immediately following that, or was that did you still linger around with the A&P guys there?
Yeah, we still had 2 months until we closed the fob. So
So
we stuck around.
Security procedures and everything at the time.
We did, yeah. We stopped going to the governor's compound, and thank God we didn't lose anybody in that attack. We actually we had one guy get hit square in the back of the helmet and round through the Squadron XO's sleeve right next to me, around through my pant leg, and our squadron commander, I think, either got hit in the kneecap with a ricochet or while moving to cover, hit his kneecap and broke it basically. So, yeah, I mean, just a miracle that only the shooter was killed. But yeah, we changed some stuff up. We raised our risk aversion a little bit, and that's, another part of this whole story is the risk aversion by U.S. forces. And to a certain extent, some of it makes sense. If we know the mission is bullshit, it's not worth dying for it. If we know the Afghans are feeding us crap, we're not going to take a bunch of risk when we can just help them with what they really want at the late phase of the war, which is dropping bombs, because their Air Force was still so fledgling at that time. Took it out for 2 months. After that, closing the base, burning old hard drives and all that good stuff. And then our battalion kind of went up to Bagram for a little bit, and then onward to Jalalabad, ran Fenty and stuff there while ISIS was taking over southern Nangarhar. And then I actually left the squadron and went over to Coast Province to Camp Clark and took over as a Rifle Company XO there. So left the advising behind. Ended up closing Camp Clark a month into the job, kind of in a surprise turnaround there. We thought it might stay open through the winter, but surprise, we had 10 days to close it. So we did.
Coast being the K in P2K, just in case listeners or fellow podcast hosts weren't aware of it.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks, Steve.
It's not Capisa?
but we talk about and we've talked about it on the podcast before. You have these insider attacks, and then what happens is you talk about driving that wedge between us and our Afghan counterparts. So, and you really saw that at CAF when we were there. More so that we almost had a unofficial hierarchy of how valuable you were as a human being, and that value was this. And I think we've talked about it before. Is the outer ring, of course, of the base is an Afghan A&A part, right? And that's what they have to guard, and that's what they have to patrol. And then inside you have some other RISMA, what we call RISMA, Resolute Support Mission, Afghanistan nations like Romania and some of these smaller countries, and they would guard the actual Kandahar airfield. And they're basically guarding Kandahar airfield not from insurgents, but from anybody in the Afghan army on the outer wall that might do us any harm. I mean, they have to guard against both of those people. And then on the inside, you actually have Americans and Australians and what you would consider these, Five Eye guys in the middle. And it's wild how we have this hierarchy of at that point. And if A&A and if any Afghans came in, they had to surrender their weapons to whatever Romanian was running the checkpoint that day. And it's that has to feel like a slap in the face. This is my country. I'm coming into this base to meet my U.S. counterparts, and I have got to give my weapon up because they have that much trust in me. turn it in, turn all the weapons in.
Yeah, so that I wanted to ask, like on that, like every Afghan military unit, every Afghan police unit, just like any other job, there are people who are there who believe in the mission, believe in what they're trying to accomplish, and want to be a positive force for change. So, what does that do? You know, you have a green on blue, you have an insider attack, and now, you know, all advising and training is on hold for a month. So, what does that do to that relationship, to that Afghan police lieutenant who wants to, you know, be a positive force in, you know, Gardez or Nangarhar or wherever they may be?
Kills his morale. Gives him some grievances to maybe honor his family's blood feud when next time he gets access to someone, or gives him the motivation to just look the other way. You know, when the Taliban's come into the checkpoint at night, offering a chance to surrender or die, you know, he might sell himself out and sell his guys out, but let the Taliban through, bring the suicide bomb into town for the next day. Yeah, I mean, that is so demoralizing on the Afghan side too. And, you know, we're talking about the value assigned to different people's lives. We all, the Ugandans with triple canopy out there on the wall at some places and holding down the guard towers. And then the Afghan police would come through this full ring of security, and their own countrymen in the Afghan army would harass the shit out of them. You know, it'd be Tajiks from the north in the Afghan army running this checkpoint, extorting Afghan cops for money when it's all the same pot of money paying them from us. Yeah, it just gets absolutely demoralizing. So those guys, if they weren't playing both sides before as a survival mechanism, they're definitely going to be playing both sides. They're going to have multiple SIM cards so they can talk with the Taliban. They're gonna get money where they can and take care of their families and find their exit. And so there's a brain drain too from the Afghan security forces. Always has been, and see if the Taliban can hold all the talent in their ranks now.
See, that's something we should have looked into. Was I remember like all these Afghans having SIM cards like it's 2006. I'm like, if we're gonna invest money in anything, let's get them some fucking iPhones. Because, you know, fucking Aga John walking around with 3 iPhones is pretty fucking sketchy, right? But you could have 1 phone and 4 SIM cards, and I'm not going to know about the other 3. You know, that's what we could have spent some of that $14 trillion on. So apparently, yeah, that's the number, $14 trillion, including money spent or money given to contractors or some shit like that.
What?
Or contract companies.
Yeah, there was.
I thought it was 2. Oh,
no, that's for the war effort itself, Stu.
Oh, that's so gross.
Trillion here, trillion there. Pretty soon we're talking real money. We're starting to see some stimmy packages when you start throwing out those numbers.
I mean, I appreciated my part of it, but Jesus, that like physically hurts.
I just saw an article that we're actually sending money to Afghanistan again, to the Taliban this time.
Well, that's good.
So it's good to know that we not only lost the war, but now have to pay tribute.
In the words of Flatland Cavalry, some things never change.
Yeah, supposedly.
Just a reverse Marshall Plan.
It's all coming back around.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like, well, it's so like, what's that going to? That's funding the curtains to separate the classes of the universities, so that, you know, we make sure that those wily 19-year-old boys and those surly 19-year-old girls don't get too much of a glance at each other.
That's not going to last too long, though.
No, that's not.
Women are not.
They are the eye of the world right now, and so they've got to play nice. And I have zero doubt that eventually, 6 months after we don't care about Afghanistan anymore, which should be any time now. Yeah, they're going to go right back. I mean, you're already seeing stories about women in Kabul who are being harassed by the Taliban and shit like that. It's but whatever. Hey,
it's kind of interesting and weird that they're pretending, even because we're not gonna rush back out to defend women's rights. We kind of made our position on that clear by leaving them to their eventual fate anyway. Like everyone knows that they're gonna basically lose, you know, any semblance of being equal human beings. when we're gone. So it's just, I don't know. It's just weird that they're sort of holding off on it and allowing like that female protest to occur and stuff. But I don't know.
Oh yeah,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, I was going to ask Evan, if was there any like idea when you were working, I guess, in 2017, that there would be this kind of just mass surrender, I suppose, or like, vacating your post? It happened all the time, obviously, but like at a national scale. I mean, did you see that with the police you were advising?
Well, so in 14, we thought there could be a civil war in our area. So, Gardez is the front door of the Ahmadzai tribe, which is Ghani's family. So if the Culinary Institute of America had not rigged that election for our boy, then that area would have descended into a civil war. So when he was elected, when John Kerry went there and achieved the agreement between Abdullah and Ghani, I mean, there was celebratory tracer fire all night, every night for like a week straight. Like just red sunset tracers from Gardez. Like it was a big deal. So we were actually preparing contingency plans. I mean, God bless the staff of our brigade and squadron. I use those terms interchangeably: brigade, regiment, squadron, battalion. Sorry, just try to
some group of soldiers.
Some group of soldiers, yeah. So we made some contingency plans somewhere about how we would get the hell out of there if a civil war broke out in the Southeast. So there was some semblance of, hey, there's really no national unity here. And then in 2017, when things were worse, I don't think anybody in Southeast was that pessimistic that we could think that the whole thing would fall to the Taliban in 2 weeks or less. But yeah, we definitely had no confidence that the national government could hold sway outside of a few provinces.
So, real quick on Ghani and the Ahmadzai, God bless the Culinary Institute of America. I never thought to use that acronym. When that election was over, so Ghani gets a lot of flack, right? He was a Berkeley professor. He lived in the States for 40-something years. He released that memo the other day about like why he fled and shit in English. So way to appeal to your your fellow Afghans. Do they like him down there in Gardez, where the Ahmadzai are?
Oh yeah, I mean the Ahmad, yeah, his family did for sure.
I was just curious because there's like all those there's rumors that he doesn't even speak Pashto, which I don't fucking know. I couldn't tell you the difference between the two languages. So
yeah, well, yeah, I guess I don't know if I've ever actually heard him speak Pashto, but he probably speaks it with like the northern or southern, or not southern, northern or eastern dialects, or central, if you will. So it's definitely not that smooth, poetic Pashto that you hear down in Kandahar. But I mean, he was popular in that area, but I think a lot of that had to do with just the legacy of Durrani Pashtuns ruling the country, going back to Ahmed Shah Durrani taking over in 1747, and it's 250 years of precedent that the East was trying to break. What's that?
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. And so, like Najibullah, president under the communist regime, he was also a Ahmadzai and from Gardez. And so the Eastern Pashtuns were starting to influence national level politics. And so that was, of course, popular among these tribes, even if they didn't care for the man or the policy or the concept of a national government. They still just wanted reprisals against their neighbors.
That sounds just like our fucking voting base.
That does. I was about to.
Like I know more people that vote for the person based on either what letter is in parentheses next to the name, or because it's not that letter in parentheses next to their name. Mm-hmm. So I guess Joe Biden said that we accomplished our mission in Afghanistan. He's right. They vote like Americans.
Yeah, or we vote like Afghans. I don't know. I think our devolution is worse in many ways. In many ways, I think it is.
I mean, we've only had the Age of Enlightenment to guide us, and we've just kind of shit all over it. Whereas, like, the Afghans are still working on electricity. consistent electricity, even in Pangier.
So, that's. I find it fascinating, Evan, that you actually got to go sit down and actually advise some of these policemen that we were as because we were all part of the train advise assist team, and I don't think I ever interfaced with a single Afghan. So outside of just like, hey man, how's it going? Walking from one place to the other. So
We're trying to get a picture with her.
Insightful stuff. Yeah, we're trying to get a picture with Rossi. Brandon was the only one that succeeded.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's a good picture too.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, he's got one. So, yeah, he's got his only picture made with a war criminal / national hero. So I don't have one of those.
Yeah. Down at CAF, they had these "What would Rozic do" patches that a lot of people wore, and we made a Taco Tuesday shirt with a fake Rozic quote on it, saying "Live like it's Taco Tuesday."
I've got an actual Rozic patch though.
Wow.
Emily, the lieutenant that went out and I guess she was a human lieutenant. She actually got to leave, CAF and go talk to Afghan. She brought me a Rozic patch from one of his guys, so I've got that in a box somewhere. Pretty cool.
That's
cool.
cool.
Well, Afghan memorabilia, man. What do you do?
I think about like the train advise assist mission, right? And I think it was all like just based out of Camp Hero, which for the listeners, Camp Hero was the Afghan side of CAF. And the only time we ever saw Afghans, it was General Rozic, right? He would come into the KIFC, he'd walk through because he was going to somebody's office, right? Usually like the deputy commander or the commanding general. He was going to their office and he'd just slide through the KIFC and drop off pomegranates and shit like that. But beyond that, there was no advising, right? There were no Afghans on the jock floor, like outside of the linguists, watching as we conducted a strike in central Shawali Kot, or while we're flying UAV missions into Gorak when we get reports that the district center is under attack or literally on fire and shit like that. And that's where they should have been, because you can sanitize that situation so that you can have non-Five Eye partners, which for the listeners, Five Eye is reference to the Five Eyes, or the 5 English-speaking nations: U.S., Canada, Great Britain, New Zealand, and Australia. There's no reason the Afghans, like the 205th commander, couldn't be in that jock room watching that strike happen or watching that mission happen and getting an idea of what modern asymmetric warfare looks like from the passenger seat.
Yeah, like, so when they eventually kind of did something like that, like towards the end of the war, but it was separated. So we'd have like our jock, and then we'd have the Afghan jock, where everything's rolled down and they're all on computers, like tracking stuff, and then you'd have your like maybe a couple screens so they could see strike, in communication with their guys on WhatsApp or on. But yeah, we never had like that full integration. If you really wanted to get like good collaborative work done, you had to find a way everyone in the same room together, have a translator there if you need to. And it just, we either didn't do it soon enough, or didn't enough when we did actually implement it.
You nailed it, Stu. We did not have full integration. I think that's the key takeaway from this episode. Evan, you talked about it so much, but that's it. You nailed it, Stu. It's like 20 years in a country, and we couldn't even figure out how to communicate with these people and how to build anything. That's it.
Go fight this war, but don't worry about figuring out command and control, requirements, tactics, and policies and procedures.
Don't talk to Americans. As a matter of fact, we're going to sequester you on the outside where you're more prone to get killed. And I don't know. And we care about you guys, by the way, but leave that weapon out. You're not the same level as us.
Or just shit like, or just shit like, here's intelligence that we got from an Afghan source that you can't see. You're not allowed to know. Come on.
Yeah, the tear lines in the intel world are like they're necessary, right? And one of the big things, especially with signals collection, is shit's classified based on the collection method. Well, if I'm just taking the text that Baba John is in Loy Carez Calais at this grid location, and he's got he's got 3 pomegranates, and that's code for RPG. Why can't I literally just take that, like cut that out, throw it in a fucking Word document, give it to the linguist, say, hey, put this in Pashto, and give it to the damn ANP or ALP or ANA commander and go, what do you think about this? Like, there's no reason we couldn't do that. But man, like getting shit railed down to the Afghans was so fucking difficult, and all the information came from fucking Afghans.
Yep, all the information worth a damn. And yeah, I mean that's absolutely right. You nailed it, Stu. Like, we never achieved unity of effort, which is what we preach in our doctrine, is unity of effort. Never did it ourselves as the U.S., and certainly never did it with our international partners, the Afghans. And I think a lot of that stems from the incentives available to our military personnel. I mean, the U.S. Army is built for the 1950s. Like, the incentives are serve your time, get a pension, check these boxes, follow this defined career path. There is no bonus pay. Go be management consultants, but you don't have the incentives available to management consultants.
Afterwards, go be a contractor on the military base where you retired from, work another 20 years, get another pension.
Yes. Yeah, just
Speaking of the pipeline,
broken incentives lead to broken results.
Speaking of the pipeline, yeah, let's talk about. Can you tell us a little bit about how you work? I mean, I know you said you got out as a captain, so I don't classify you in the level of people I have a beef with in
You're not
the
feeling
United
great,
States
bud. You're
Army.
good.
Yeah, you're not feel great. You do not get my wrath for messing up this war, bud. No worries, Evan. But can you talk a little bit about maybe how a common theme we've had this season is that all this intelligence gets filtered, or it gets smoothed over as it goes up the chain of command, to the point where the colonel is not even briefing the same thing I told him that morning, to the point that then the general that hears that is telling the NATO commander that that's fine, man, it's great. So why does that happen, Evan, in your opinion, from your O3 perspective there?
Yeah, I think everybody wants to look good. I mean, maybe so. Like the Afghans within Pashtunwali, they've got pride, and if you embarrass a person's pride, you're done. And so I think we borrowed that to a certain extent, where we had to look good, we had to show progress, we had to accomplish pet projects that advanced some unique initiative. We had to look like the cool guys. So, like, just to generally chat about officer career progression. So officers have to complete what are called key developmental positions at each rank. And then when they do that, they get good ratings. Then they go complete a broadening assignment. And a broadening assignment is not directly related to their job sometimes. Like, it's what everybody wants to do, something fun or really relaxed in a broadening job. So they work really hard in their key developmental jobs, hoping to go do some cool guy stuff. And so to get those good ratings, officers within units are ranked against each other. So every captain in a battalion is ranked from 1 to 10. And so the top performer is ranked number 1, and that's what is looked at for his promotion to major, is the rank he had amongst his peers in that unit. So it's a constant game of one-upsmanship. And so different geographic regions, the TAC headquarters, are all trying to one-up each other. And I think it goes all the way up to the colonel level, because they all want to get the star, and so they have to one-up each other in command. So every commander has his own unique initiatives.
So
the biggest thing as you're moving up the levels is that failures can't be your fault, and if there are failures, you have to make them not failures in the way that you them. And I think that influenced a lot of the, I guess, a lot of the double thing is going on, where you're being told every day that there's a problem, but by the time it gets above you, everything's fine.
If and hear me out, Evan. What if like captains had like focused more on clearly communicates objectives to company leadership, oversees that training is being, and not like the sexual harassment training, but like warrior battle tasks and shit is getting done, and that products are being made on time, briefings are going well, like actual objectable measurable progress is being made. What if those had been the metrics on what makes a captain a good captain, instead of shit like checks the boxes?
Yeah, I mean, if that happened, then the colonel wouldn't look as good relative to his peers. It's like a game of the prisoner's dilemma to a certain extent. Like there are incentives to defect from doing what is right, and to try to advance one's self-interest. And when everyone does it, we're all circling the drain as we fail together. But yeah, I mean, obviously there at that company level, platoon level, there have been a lot of outstanding leaders. I mean, NCOs, officers throughout this war, there have been some really remarkable folks doing great things and saying screw you to the mission and kind of bucking what the colonels tell them. And there are some highly effective colonels that have served too. But yeah, by and large, if captains tried doing right by their troops, they probably got shat on at any point in the last 20 years.
And that's the sad part. Yeah, all the good leaders, they're done. They get out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they do. Yeah, they generally don't make it very far.
Yeah, who was it? Nate Fink from Generation Kill. I think he's a pretty easy example for the viewer to know. If you haven't seen Generation Kill, go watch it. It's the best Iraq War media.
And the funny thing about that is, it's not unique to the military, right? Like any job has that. I have that issue where I work at now. It's like if I keep asking these three guys to do 75% of the work, eventually they're going to leave and they'll go somewhere else, make more money and work less, right? The difference is I'm not asking them to go train people how to kill the enemy, right? Huge difference. And that's not a mindset you can have in the military. And I think like that comes with government service though, right? Like there's everybody's goal where I grew up was to work for the government because you do 20 years and you're set. And you get a lot of those people in the officer world. And I mean, Evan, all you had to do was sit out 10 more years, man. Did 10 more years, you get your pension. Maybe you won't get on a board like Lockheed, but you can get on a board for like some subcontractor for Lockheed. It could have happened.
End up running your own contracting company and possibly making even more.
I am a service-connected disabled veteran, so I could start a great company.
Well, that's not enough acronyms, bud.
You find yourself an ethnically acceptable female to co-found the company with you, and you're set.
So what do you do now, Evan? Now that you're out, because we talked about that too on the podcast, like how we find our place after the whole thing's over.
Oh gosh, wow, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, so I'm working as a business analyst in an insurance agency now. A little bit like the S2, like I do some project management, do some system administration, and try to use data to inform decisions for our business. And I like it. I love it. I mean, I work with some awesome people, and I think insurance it's an interesting industry. There's always something changing, and I think we provide some products that customers value. But the journey out of the military, I did not have a great transition out. Had no idea what I wanted to do, but definitely knew I wanted to stay the hell away from government and national security. And it's heartbreaking though at the same time too, because any leader in the Army who's charged with people's lives wants to see those people succeed even after they part ways. So like soldiers that I commanded at one point, like I still stay in touch with them the best I can, but I'm also trying to pour my heart into my children and my family now. So it's definitely a tough mission to transition out of the military and to leave that sort of stuff behind. But definitely glad I'm not in Afghanistan.
I remember when I got out and I'm doing the what's it called now, SFL TAP or whatever the fuck the acronym is nowadays, and I'm doing the transition stuff. And when you get out of the Army, there's like 6 classes you have to choose, like what, 2 of them or some shit like that. And it's stuff like, oh, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to start my own business. I think there's one is like, I'm going to go be a mechanic because, they just got the Army just fucking, typecasted to a T. And then there's ones like, for people who want to go work for the government. And I was one of 2 people who did not select that one because I knew I did not want to work for the government anymore. It was me and some guy. So I got out of the Army at Fort Lewis, an hour south of Seattle. He started an armored car company transporting money from dispensaries to banks because the state of Washington had not, they had legalized recreational marijuana, but they didn't allow for EFT transactions for funds. So he made a killing just going to a dispensary, picking up their money, driving it to the bank. Fucking genius. And here I am on a podcast with you losers.
Yeah, seriously.
If you're listening Spotify.
He found his niche.
I did.
But yeah, Evan, the transitions, it's rough. I know me and Zach have talked about it. I've talked about it not really in detail, but just what happens dealing with clearances outside of the military and stuff like that. And of course the disillusionment that comes with it. You talked earlier in the interview about how you were kind of jaded and kind of enraged and just not in a good way thinking about the military. But at the same time, and I've talked to people about this before, and I'm sure you can vouch, is that you have to figure okay, all of this happened in the past, and because it's so much of a brotherhood. I hate to use that term, but it's absolutely true. The guys that I flew in those spy planes with, I would do anything for if they called me up tomorrow, and I haven't talked to them in years, but I'd do whatever I could for them. And you have to move from that to a world where that's not valid anymore. No one appreciates it, and you'll never experience that again. And that transition of having all these skills and feeling important, or that you can do something, and then you have to find your way in the world again outside of that is very hard. I don't know if you feel the same way though.
Yeah, the sense of purpose, the mission in the military, it's a hell of a drug, and miss it to a certain extent. Yeah, absolutely miss the people. And it's a very real world too. That culture, that closeness, that's very real. That's very tangible. Hopefully it makes a difference in some people's lives for the positive, but the rest of the world is also a very real world. And you can't get out of it. You can't get out of the reality. Everybody does leave the military at some point, even if it's to go sit on the board at Lockheed. They still, then their hassle becomes watching what they say because SEC might be jumping down their throats soon. Everybody has a boss still, even when they get out. But yeah, it's definitely tricky. And I think this whole Afghanistan situation could be really frustrating to a lot of folks that are in that transition now, looking to make it, have made it recently. So I feel you for anyone in that spot right now. It's tough, but
we
can do
got
it.
lucky because when we all got out, it's I don't know what I'm going to do. Fuck it. I'll go to Afghanistan and pretend to be a soldier again, and I'll get to wear khakis this time around. And now if you get out, you don't have that luxury. So sucks to suck.
Yeah, war is drying up. Peace is breaking out everywhere.
There will be a new war. Just give it time.
Yep.